If you're thinking about tuning your WRX, the VB platform specifically, this is an awesome car to do that with. In this video, we're going to talk about the access port, the e-tuning process. I'm going to give you a little bit of a walkthrough, and then we're going to answer all the common questions and have a really fun conversation with my favorite tuner for this platform, which is Alan from Edge Autosport. Genuine human being. I'll have timestamps and chapters in the video so you can bounce around and get the information you need. So if you're looking for any popular questions or top of mind thoughts, it's probably in this video. So stick around, we'll get into it and have fun tuning your WRX. If you want to tune your WRX, the best solution right now in the market is a Cobb access port still. They've always been a thing for Subarus, but you pair this with Alan over at Edge Autosport and that is a great solution, just like we did on the Focus ST. He tunes a lot of other cars and he's someone I've trusted and been friends with for years and years. So we're going to unbox this Cobb access port and then we're going to reach out to Alan via email and get the tuning process started on this. It'll be all remote, it doesn't matter where you live, and he can take care of you. So right inside this box, you open it up, and I got this access port. You can get it from a lot of different places. I got this from MA Performance. They've been helping out with this build, super genuine to work with. I appreciate them, and they got us dialed in with this access port. So we open it up, we got our stickers, and then we have the actual access port device. I'll leave this linked in the description as well as Alan's information so you have everything you need. There's a little gray faceplate on it already. We pop on this side. Per usual, we have a black faceplate, which I usually like to throw on. It's a little more discreet. A lot of people like to run these in the windows to monitor and stuff, so having that faceplate a color you like is pretty nice. I'm not one these days. I don't like to look at the numbers and stress. Let the ECU do the work, and if anything weird happens, it'll throw a check engine light. Usually. You have the mount here, that's magnet to go in this, and then you have a bunch of different mounting systems. In this box right here, you have a little accessories setup. Then you have this adhesive mounting section so you can glue it to your dash or something like that, or you can get a suction cut mount for the window. I'm not gonna use any of them because I'm not gonna mount it where I can see it. Here is our wire to go to our OBD2 port, and then this side has a little cover on it that goes in the bottom of the access port for the device. You will need a Mac or PC to plug your access port into with this USB cable so you can send your data logs and files to the tuner to work with them. And we're gonna show you every step of the way. And this Cobb box comes with a little mini jet tag. If you've never tuned a car, had an access port, it's pretty simple. It's not as simple as others. I got my access port here. I took the little faceplate off and I sent Alan over at Edge Autosport, which I'll leave his link in the description. If you want to get your tune through him, he does it fully remote. He needs this serial number right here. So I gave him that so I can go ahead and snap my faceplate back on. And it comes with a black one too, as you saw. And then this cable right here plugs into the bottom, and then this goes in your OBD2 port. Up underneath here is where you plug it in. The screen will pop on. I'm gonna get in the car. I'm gonna turn the ignition on. I'm gonna click this right here to make that awful beeping stop. Tells you how the buttons work. We're gonna hit install. We're gonna turn our AC off. Make sure all of our lights are off and everything. 2022 USDM WRX, continue, confirm. It's asking what map we wanna flash. It really doesn't matter right now. I'm just gonna do stage 191, and then once this is fully installed, we'll be able to plug this into the computer next, load the base map from Alan, and then we'll start the car for the first time with all of our modifications. Couple on and offs, it's installed. Now we can head to the computer and install the base map, and then we'll come back out here and flash it. When you plug in your access port to the computer for the first time, you're gonna download the app called Access Port Manager. It's gonna save the factory ECU data for a few minutes first. So I'm gonna let it do that, and then we'll pull up Alan's email with our file to flash on this. On that email from Alan, there's gonna be a .ptm file that you're gonna go ahead and download, and I have it in my downloads, and I'm just gonna drag it to the Access Port Manager, and it's gonna say confirm file copy. So we just go hit yes, and then in this list of maps installed, you will see it at the top up here, and it says EA Edge Autosport Cameron A 91 Octane E-Tune version 1. So now we can go to the top right corner, hit eject, and go to the car. So we're gonna go to tune, change ECU map, look for the one that we just added, ECU reflash, then the Edge Autosport one. You can actually hold down on the center button and it'll tell you some details that the tuner wrote down. We just hit the center button and it's gonna do some steps to flash it. So on, off, just follow everything on screen. It'll take a couple minutes and then we get to start it up for the first time and let it idle. It just finished flashing. It said it was successful. So I'm gonna hit the back button, get to gauges. When you get to the gauge layout, you want to click the green right arrow, and then you're going to go to configure data logging, and then there's going to be a list of items you can check on or off. I have Alan's email pulled up, and there's a massive list of things that you need to make sure are checked off, so when you do data log, it's recording those parameters and those parameters only, so then he'll put it into his tuning software, and then he'll be able to make the adjustments needed. So this is a really important step. So I'm gonna go through this list and check all of them, and he breaks it down in the email, and it's super straightforward. All right, we're ready for our first start. When you're in the gauges screen, you're just gonna click the center button to start logging. Data logging started. For a base map, it is crazy smooth. I love working with Alan. And this car is already making some cool turbo noises. Yeah, dude, it's freaking quick just for a base tune.
From a tuning standpoint, there's been a lot of push with this newer WRX with the VB to correct some, I guess, thought patterns from owners, and that kind of revolves around the dynamic advanced multiplier system on the car, which you've probably heard about it, and it's the thing that panics everybody the most. If it changes, like, sell the car kind of thing. But really, it's actually a super cool feature, and when it's changing because it's detecting something that required it to change, and so it's protecting the car. That doesn't mean that the car is going to blow up or that anything's necessarily wrong. You especially will deal with stuff like this being in a 91 octane state, since you can't really get better fuel unless you're running ethanol. The dynamic advanced multiplier is going to be dynamic, and it's going to move, but what you should see is whenever you are doing more performance-oriented driving, you should see it stay at 1, because that's where you're getting the most power. If it was dropping really bad under performance, that would suggest that it's a little bit too aggressive. It's also, if you have bad fuel, you want it to drop. So you can't really have it both ways, so to speak. If you make it so it never moves, which I know people who do that, it doesn't function as it should anymore, and then you lose that benefit of it being able to protect your engine. And it may never look like anything's wrong, but that just means it's probably not, it's just not responding to what could be wrong, so to speak. Well, that's just what Subaru calls it. It's not necessarily specific to Subaru. The calibrations for different cars, they have similar things, just called something differently. Like for Ford, it's called the octane adjust ratio. Or on newer Fords, it's the knock octane modifier. It all kind of does the same thing. It's just dynamically adding timing. And the goal being to add timing because you're going to get better fuel economy when you're running a little bit more spark advanced, but you have to deal with fuel quality issues. So if they set the timing here and it's going to get the best miles per gallon, the best power for 93 octane, and then you got someone that's in California running absolute crap 91 octane, it's going to knock. And so in order for that person to get the best fuel mileage that his car can give him, they have to make it dynamic so that it can provide, the power on 91, but then, we've got better fuel, so we can give it a little bit more. It can decide that for itself based on the response to the knock sensors.
So it's the knock sensors that are deciding what the dynamic advance multiplier is going to be at that given time.
It's the ECU looking at feedback from the knock sensors. The knock sensor is just a microphone. It's listening for noise. And so it knows the frequency range that knock is occurring at. And so it can listen. And when it starts to get to that frequency, it knows there's knock. But really, it actually knows before it gets to that knock frequency that it's in the threshold for where knock can occur. And so a lot of times you're getting movement from the dynamic advanced multiplier before knock is actually happening, and that's how they're protecting the engine with that. So it's a very important feature. It's not something that anyone needs to panic about if it moves. It is something that is really good to have. It has gotten way better over the years. Older Subarus, that's where the stereotype comes from, is if my dynamic dropped, my engine's probably going to blow any second. Like that was like back in the early 2000s. Like if that changed, something was wrong. But it was also like the beginning of the system when it was just kind of dumb, and now it's gotten way more sensitive, way more smart. See if it goes back to 1 over time. One of the ways you can get it back to 1 quicker is to kind of do some half throttle pulls, like some a little bit higher low. You don't necessarily have to go full throttle. You can if you want to, but you'll see it start to go back up to 1 as you do a little bit higher throttle pulls. And different RPM ranges are more sensitive to it. So, and even under shifting, like sometimes you'll get like a feedback knock or a fine knock learn will happen in a shift. And fine knock learn, in order for it to learn itself away, you have to go through that range where it learned it, and it has to see that there's no continual knock before it will go away. So that's the other thing that I see that people get panicked over is like I constantly get this, minus 1.41 or this minus whatever fine knock learn. Every time I go this RPM, I hit this and it drops. So it's like, well, it's not constantly knocking, that it learned that it saw a knock there. And so it will continue to pull timing out, even though it's not knocking whenever you cross through that load and RPM range. And that's its way of checking, like, okay, I pulled timing out and I'm not getting knocked. Okay, let's add a little bit of timing back in. Still not getting knocked. Okay, let's add a little bit more. And so that's why it's dynamic, and it's constantly changing. It's constantly trying to get the most out of your car and get better miles per gallon, fuel efficiency, all that. And then so it's going to add it, and sees knock, it pulls it back out and adds it again, and it just kind of keeps riding that line. That's just the biggest thing that I see, like as far as people kind of panic over, and I get the most questions about, is people asking about that. And that's even from people that aren't running custom tunes or running just like off the shelf maps, or even stage 0 map. If you watch the stage 0 map, which is the stock map, like the dynamic multipliers kind of all over the place. Like it's up and down, and it moves a lot, which is what it's supposed to do. In my experience, I don't get the Subi wave anymore. That's the biggest theme that I've seen, is like when I drive my car, like I noticed I don't really get the Subi wave like I used to in my VA WRX or even in my STI that I had a while back. That's the theme that I've gotten from the VB. But I don't know. I think the VB is the best WRX that they've made by a long shot.
Why do you say that?
The engine is better. It's way more bulletproof. The torque that you get off boost is just incredible. Like driving it around, it feels so good. And if you've driven, you've had a VA WRX, right?
I had a VA STI, but I've driven buddies VA's WRXs a little bit.
Do you notice how they just kind of feel sluggish and dead until you start getting into boost?
Yeah.
Like I did not realize until I drove the VB WRX, like, man, it is a world of difference how nice it is to drive off boost. Like it just feels like it wants to go. Mm-hmm. And that's from the 2.4 liter engine. It's more displacement, but even like with the STI, it's 2.5, but with, I think it was lower compression ratio. So it still didn't have as much torque as what the 2.4 has just off boost.
It's crazy driving the GR Corolla and the WRX back to back around town.
Yeah.
Like the WRX just like scoots around. Like it's so easy to drive, like just because of that low end torque, like not in boost. Like I just pull out of my street and I'm like, oh, this thing just moves on its own. Like this is nice.
Yeah.
It just gets out of its own way. And then you get into boost and it's like, oh, wow. There's like last night when I was doing pulls, I was like, oh, this thing's actually quick.
Yeah, they're quick. They're torquey. They kind of remind me a little bit of the Fords in terms of how they make, like how the torque curve and the power curve is shaped, because it's like, that mountain of torque and then kind of a flat horsepower, which as you turn things up, one of the things that 400 foot-pounds is kind of like the line that people are trying not to cross for transmission preservation reasons. So you'll see, like, one of the things I try to do when I'm tuning like bigger power setups is keep torque a little bit lower, which involves, shaping the boost curve and stuff like that to not have it hit all at once, and that'll save the transmission. But like on my car, because it's mine and I'm not worried about it as much as like I wouldn't want a customer to have a problem, but I've got to test things. Like I've given it torque and it makes a lot of torque if I wanted to, and it will also kill clutches and transmissions if you try to use that too much.
things like
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. So one of the things that I've noticed is the intercooler on the VBWRX is really good, like the stock one. As far as like track use, like it will heat soak faster than some of the upgraded options. But I tested a bunch of them personally. So like I had a ETS, Cobb, Perrin, Grimspeed, and I think that was all of them that I've done so far. And I tested all of them, and they all made within a few horsepower of each other. They all, like, temperature wise, there were a few standouts. I think Grimspeed and Perrin were probably the best as far as like the temperature deltas that I noticed. But by best, I mean like within like 5 or so degrees or something. It wasn't very much. And even the stock one, now with heat, the stock one would heat soak faster and stay heat soaked longer than the aftermarket ones. And that's kind of where you're getting most of your benefit, is like preventing heat soak. But the stock one, in terms of performance, was right there with all of them. They were all within a few horsepower, within a few degrees. It's a really good stock intercooler. But I mean, if you think about that, it's the size of the STI intercooler, I think, from the VA STI, but it's doesn't have a turbo sitting underneath it to keep it hot. So it's able to shed that heat better than the STI was. Yeah, it's actually really simple. You just purchase the tune right now. There, you can buy the tune from hedgeautosport.com. That's where I have my tunes listed available. And once you purchase the tune, you're going to get an email that requests info, like the AP info, and you can put that up on the screen if you want, like what you sent me. Basically, you send me the AP info, your mods list, and I'll send you a base map and instructions for data logging. You're going to do some idle data logging and some part throttle driving to make sure MAF calibration is in line and get that dialed in, and then wide open throttle. Usually do third gear pulls, depending on the setup, 2,500 RPM or 3,000 RPM, up to about 6,000 RPM. And for the final, I'll probably have you go a little bit further just to catch that like full window. But as far as revisions, it takes anywhere from 3 to 6, depending on what we're dealing with. Like with your car, I haven't tuned a MAP intake before, and so I've had to do a little more work on the MAF cal. Once you got that leak fixed, it kind of came back in line, and then it was just a matter of tweaking the MAF cal. And because I'd changed some things before you fixed the leak, and so I had to go back, and so that adds a few extra revisions getting that worked out. They're actually really easy to tune, and the reason that is they have the electronic wastegate instead of pressure gate that the VAs have. And it just kind of removes a lot of the variances. Like with a pressure gate, like one wastegate duty cycle table will behave completely different on a different car. Like you can copy and paste your wastegate duty cycle from one car into another car that's the same setup, and it won't work the same. Like you need to make adjustments. With this one, it's almost this is the boost that I make at this wastegate pressure or at this wastegate position. It makes it a lot easier to dial on a boost curve. Even like the map that I see, you're hitting your boost targets perfectly. So for revisions, I'm just changing the boost targets and verifying that it's still hitting what I want it to hit, rather than having to be like, oh well, we didn't hit the boost target, so let's tweak the wastegate a little bit. Oh no, it still didn't hit. Let's modify this a little bit. Okay, now we're getting our boost target. Oh wait, let's add a PSI and see if it still works. It's like, so now it's just like, nope, the wastegate table is dialed in. I've done that on my car, and it translates well to the other cars that I tune. It changes based on the downpipe. The biggest things that you change the wastegate duty cycle table for on these cars is like if you do a downpipe or J-pipe or turbo, and then you have to redo the wastegate model. But once it's set, it's set. If you have some kind of like no name intake or something that's going to require a lot of revisions to dial in a MAF sensor, then you might want to hold off driving. But in most cases, with a lot of the intakes that are on the market, they work with the stock tune, and you don't have to tune for them. And then most of the ones that don't work with the stock tune, I've calibrated for, so I just have one ready to go. And at the very least, it gets you in the ballpark of being able to drive safely. So in most cases, you can just take the base map and go do whatever you want. I personally would prefer to see logs. Like I wouldn't want you to just go out on the base map and then, go hit the drag strip, go hit the local circuit track and just have a blast. Like I want to see logs before I check you off to go beat on the car. But the base map is set up to be safe for that reason. So you probably could do that and be okay. I just would want to see that before you beat on it. But as far as daily driving the car, you're more than fine to daily. Like there shouldn't be any interruption at all to your daily life with the tune, aside from having to, like, in between your point A to B, find a place to take a data log and then send it to me. The biggest thing that I would want people to know is that it's an absolute blast of a car to drive. Like, I was very surprised when I got it, how much fun it is to drive and how much fun it is to mod. It is fairly easy to mod. It's relatively cheap to mod, and the power per dollar is huge. Like, you get a lot out of this car, especially considering the fact that the stock fuel system doesn't even need to be modified to get you to that 400 horsepower range. In fact, I know some people using method injection are pushing 500 horsepower. They do have upgraded injectors and fuel pumps now, so you can push more, but most people are going to be fine with a mid 300 to 400 horsepower setup. And the car absolutely rips at that power level. It absolutely rips, and it's a blast to drive. I guess in terms of miles per gallon, it's a great buy.
Cool.
WRX with a tune and a couple bolt-ons, and it's an absolute blast. I'd say so. I mean, I guess it depends on how you're going to go about it. If you're going to buy it and you just want to get more out of it and you're not going to put any mods on it for a year or something like that, yeah, go ahead and get a tune. Like, you can get more out of it with just a tune. I can't remember. I think I made right around 300 horsepower on 91 octane with just a tune, completely stock, and the intake adds a surprising amount of power, at least at high elevation, when I was testing that specifically, because I was just really tapping out the stock turbo to try to see what it would do. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to add parts, I would get the access port and then run one of the stage maps, and then and collect your parts over the course of a month or whatever, and then get a custom tune. That's going to save you the most money, because if you get a custom tune, then you're going to have to pay a revision if you want to change it later on. And so if you're going to do that, it would be good to have the bolt-ons that you intend to run installed when you get your custom tune. But if you're going to have the car for, a longer period of time without modifying it, then it would be worth going ahead and getting a custom tune.
Well, that's super helpful, dude. I appreciate you. I can't think of anything else. I guess anything that you can think of?
Well, I have a pros and cons list, so to speak, of the VB WRX ownership, just from like my experience with mine. One of the things that drives me nuts about it, or drove me nuts about it, was the steering. It feels like it's kind of loose. It almost feels like you're chasing the front of the car around. I don't know, it just kind of feels a little bit like maybe just light in the front. I don't really know how to describe it. And then I ended up putting wider tires and wheels on when I lowered it, and it tightened everything up, and now it feels great. The other thing that is my absolute biggest gripe about the car is the brakes. Like, even driving on the street, I felt like I had to use way more pedal than any other car to get it to stop. Like, just coming up to a light, it's like you touch the brakes, like, why isn't it stopping? And you have to give it a lot more brake than you think you need to get it to stop. I put EBC yellows on, and that made it feel way better. I think if you're going to have a street car, like a street pad would be better, like the EBC reds. Not necessarily EBC, but like any kind of street pad, like Carbotech 1521 or something like that. It's going to feel way better than the stock pads. But I did the EBC yellows, so I was going to take it to the track, and they felt way better than stock, but I still killed the set of EBC yellows in one track day. That might speak something to the EBC yellows, but also I was driving the crap out of that car, so I was using a lot of brakes. If you do ever plan to track the car, like, definitely put some pads and fluid on it. It definitely needs it. That's a good question. So stock should be around 12, but it's also kind of dynamic. It'll run a little bit more boost at higher elevation to try to keep the power, similar to what it would be at sea level. It's around 12 PSI. I believe I saw as much as 14 psi when it was stock, like on the little boost gauge in the dash. With the Cobb off the shelf maps, I want to say I was seeing around 16 to 17 psi, and I typically run around 18 to 19 psi in most cases, and sometimes up to 20. Although I have had a few customers request the beans, and they'll get around, I'll do up to 21, 22 maybe for an all-out map. I myself have ran as much as 24 on my car, which is a lot. I mean, it'll give it to you. Yeah. I always try to leave a little room on the table. You can have the record-setting tune, or you can have the tune that will still be fast and still be as fast as most of your friends, but you can rely on it and not have to worry about any damage. So I try to always kind of remember that people rely on these cars. So giving everybody the record-setting tune, that's great for the first couple of months, and then it's not so great. So yeah, reliability is very important to me. Safety. I don't want to give anybody anything that's gonna hurt their car.
Cool. Well, I definitely feel that through the tuning process, and I appreciate how much you always care. So I know that carries for everyone else. And yeah, we'll wrap it up there, dude. I don't want to take any more of your time.
Yeah, let me know if you have any other questions or anything else.
Now that you've thought about tuning, or you already have your VB WRX, if you haven't thought about it yet, if you haven't done an intake or a J-pipe, these are absolutely necessary to get the most power out of your car, and they'll really bring this thing to life. Check one of these out, depending on where you're at, and you'll definitely not regret either of them.